Well, welcome, Mike. Great to see you.
Alex, recently you joined Safedin Amos, the famous author of Bitcoin Standard and the Fiat Standard and the Upcoming Principles of Economics book. In the podcast, you talk about the misery industry. Do you remember that? IMF,
Yeah,
World Bank, and so on and so forth. So this was an amazing
topic.
episode. I extremely enjoyed this. Why does it matter for Ukraine? Because IMF and World Bank are absolutely present here in Ukraine. Could you please warn Ukrainians who are a bit misconcepted, a bit misguided about the role of this organization and their fate? How could you warn them?
All right. Okay. So, I'll spend 10 seconds answering that question, and then we'll move into our chat. Be wary about taking on debt from external parties because you're going to eventually have to pay it back, principal plus interest. Mike, great to see you today. I know we both are
Good to see you.
big supporters of Ukraine and watchers of what people are doing with monetary technology there. How do you want to start? How do you want to kick things off here?
Well, first of all, I want to say Slava Ukraini. Like I am super excited to be here today. I view Ukraine as one of the places where the frontiers of freedom right now, where the fight against autocracy and authoritarianism is obviously front and center for all of you in your daily lives. And I want you to know that like I'm thinking about you. And it's obviously this is obviously a very important conversation. Both Alex and I think we share a belief that technologies like Bitcoin are in fact even more important in situations like Ukraine finds itself in today. So I'm happy to talk about anything. I'm super excited to be here, and yeah, I'm just absolutely astounded by the bravery of the Ukrainian people, and also the capacity of technology to bring us together, Bitcoin, and even this technology, the internet and video conferencing, and the ability for us to reach out and connect together in the common cause of freedom.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you all in the audience. What you're doing is amazing. Building this community is so important. Ahrefs is very happy to support you. Really excited that the new Bitcoin Magazine print edition is coming out. Can't wait to get my hands on one. We look forward to supporting the Bitcoin community in Ukraine moving forward. And we can thank actually the Bitcoin community in Ukraine for helping us understand what Bitcoin is. Back in 2013, Rights Foundation, we're, let's say, pretty skeptical about Bitcoin, or we didn't really understand it. And it took a long time for us to get it. But Ukrainian friends of ours reached out to us and asked us to run a fundraiser for them in September of 2013 because their bank accounts had been either monitored or shut down by the Yanukovych regime. And we were like, sure, let's do it. So we worked with Gary Kasparov, our chairman, and we did a little fundraiser, and we got some Bitcoin into Ukraine. And, to our surprise, it worked. People didn't believe in the technology then. It was seen as a niche thing. But we were like, okay, this is freedom money. I guess it works beyond the control of the state, and it's the same use case today. So it was fascinating, obviously, and inspiring for us to watch Ukrainians use Bitcoin, over the last 12 months, whether it be to help their families, help their communities, help their national defense. Again, we're delighted to continue to support that. Maybe Mike, we could talk a little bit about. How you see the legacy financial system start to break, in times of crisis, and how Bitcoin really starts to shine in those moments.
Yeah, well, obviously, the banking system did break, as we know, in the early days of the war, and it really goes to show how fragile our world really is. And it's something that I've been thinking about. I guess we're coming up on that very sorrowful anniversary. and I think I think like broadly there is a global awakening that's not disconnected from what's happening in Ukraine, what is happening in other autocratic regimes around the world, that technology has actually in some ways moved us closer to like a more fragile system for the maintenance of freedom. I talk a lot about the move towards these hyperscale platforms, which are in many ways a single point of failure for the internet. If we were to lose 4 or 5 very specific companies, most of what we do on the internet would just stop functioning. That's kind of like scary, and it also really brings home the fear that that sort of power, that centralized power, could fall into the hands of the wrong people. So for me, I think Bitcoin is an element of something which I think is really important. It's as Alex calls it, it's freedom money. It's money that doesn't require permission. It's money that is detached from the state, and it's money that can work in the most adversarial conditions, including even in war. But I think that the cause for freedom and the needs of maintaining that freedom go far beyond even money, which is why at TBD we're focused on decentralized identity as another really important element, so also known as self-sovereign identity, the idea that we can create digital identities that can have trust associated with them, that also don't require government. I mean, government can obviously work with these technologies, and they are, but moving towards a more robust identity layer for the internet, where we're in control of who we are, and we are in control of the relationships we have. There's other, Nostr has already been mentioned on this in this conference. I was listening to the last talk. I mean, that's another element of it. It really feels like we're in the middle of a sea change, where those of us who really care about freedom have really started to come together and really start to understand and build the solutions that will be needed, I think, to have a positive future for freedom, liberty, and democracy around the world.
Yeah, a couple things I want to mention. It'll be interesting to get Mike's reaction. So I'm kind of embarrassed for like 2 groups of people. I'm like, I don't speak for them and I disagree with them, but I'm apologizing to you on their behalf anyway. The first would be the no-coiners who just don't understand the value of Bitcoin. And this has just been proven so concretely when it comes to your own country and Ukrainian people over the last year, especially when you have people who've been able to, who were forced to flee, who had to make the hard choice to flee. They were able to bring their wealth with them. And we've seen practically how you can just go to Poland and you can go to a Bitcoin ATM and you can withdraw, up to 1,000 euros, in some cases worth of Bitcoin every day or every week without ID. And that's just like a huge innovation that's not possible with the legacy banking system. We've also obviously seen humanitarian responders send value. I mean, my organization helped finance the purchase of valuable equipment when the fiat system just didn't work. I remember this was back in, I think it was late March, early April, and it was a Friday, and we had to get some equipment. We were helping an organization that was getting some equipment, and the bank was going to be closed till Monday, and we were like, these people were like, "Oh, could you help us do it now?" And we were like, "Yeah, let's use Bitcoin," and we got it done. And I just think time and time again, it's shown how valuable it is. And then, also we have this issue of monetary colonialism, which is a real thing for Ukrainians. I mean, you have Russian troops coming in and imposing a new regime in some areas and forcibly moving the currency from the Ukrainian currency to the Russian currency. This is no different from any other monetary colonialism we've seen in history. And it's nice to know that finally, at least people, even if they're forced to live under horrible conditions, their money can't be taken from them, and they can still be part of this monetary global network that's quite unified. And I think that's important. So number one, sorry on behalf of the no coiners, and number two, I want to say sorry on behalf of a lot of fellow Bitcoin users. I mean, there's a very sad infection among the minds of a lot of people And I just feel like Peter and Mike are like very, very few of the prominent Bitcoin people who will speak out for Ukraine. But there's a lot of people out there who are, they live in America or they live in Western Europe, and they become convinced that like Ukraine is not a real thing and that the war is a scam. And it's just astonishing to watch these people function and it makes me think that everything else they say isn't true either. It's just so incredibly crazy. So on behalf of them, I'm apologizing for their pathetic behavior. And we're here to say that a lot of Bitcoiners do support Ukraine, and we're very happy to count among them. I don't know if, Mike, you have reactions to that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much more that I can add to that, Alex. I mean, I agree with everything you said. I mean, what is happening in Ukraine makes me even more sure that technologies like Bitcoin are needed for all the reasons that Alex has laid out. And yes, I think, to kind of give my opinion on it, I think a lot of people grow up in countries like the United States and Western Europe, and it's easy to take for granted freedom. Like, you don't know that you have it until you lose it. I hear a lot of those same Bitcoiners talking about the fact that America has become an authoritarian state, and it's like time to democracy has failed. I mean, you hear these things, and it's like I don't think they really understand what those words mean. I know that you understand that. I know that the people in this room in Kyiv understand what those words mean and understand how absurd they are. And I just want to say that, like, I am there with you. My heart is with you, and I really like believe that Ukraine and freedom will ultimately prevail. And I hope to do what I can, little things I can, by advancing technology for the good of freedom and democracy, and not to continue to move down this path of what I see as dangerous centralization.
And Mike says this well, but look, democracy is an idea, just like freedom. I mean, democracy is basically the word in Greek that just means power of the people instead of power by one or a small group. And it's an abstract idea that we strive for, right? And our institutions, of course, fail all the time. And I think, sadly, some people look at horrible events like the invasion of Iraq or the manipulation by American institutions, the IMF of the third world, or any countless number of horrible things that democracies have done, and they associate that with the core character of what a democracy is. But at the end of the day, a democracy is just the idea that we can hold governments accountable, and it's a very important idea, and we need to defend it. And I feel like I can say that as a critic of the largest democracy. I do a lot of writing exposing the crimes that large democracies undertake or have undertaken over the last 100 years. But to mistake those crimes for the core character of what they are is a terrible mistake. And what ends up happening to people who make that mistake is they end up supporting dictators, and it's horrible. So I think that the Ukraine event is a really big moment of moral clarity for folks. We must stand on the side of Ukrainians. We must defend freedom and democracy. And we'll continue to do that. I mean, at the Human Rights Foundation, obviously, we'll continue to support Ukraine in different ways. But I think we have this unique ability to support the Bitcoin community in Kiev and across Ukraine. And we'll continue to do that through whatever we can in terms of supporting meetups, conferences, supporting developers. I know Gleb is in the room, and we're very happy to help him in his quest to bring monetary freedom to the world. And I would encourage other developers in the room, to think about applying to our development fund. We'd be very happy to support more Ukrainian coders and people working on the Bitcoin project.
And I want to say, can I say one more thing, like Alex, about the democracy point? I also think that democracy often gets like turned into this idea that democracy is voting. It's not just voting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're doing democracy right now. We're here at a conference, like speaking truth to power, speaking our thoughts, like coming together, like forming like coalitions of like-minded folks. Like, what Alex does is democracy. Democracy is power of the people, and using that power, using the powers of speech, like the ability to organize, the ability to gain like private economic means in which to like self-actualize and also come together as groups and share in common cause. Like democracy is all of these things. It's not just voting is a very important part of it in the sense that it is how it is our ultimate accountability mechanism to remove those from power who we like no longer trust, or if we think other people are more qualified to represent us. That's super important. But I think this reductionist idea that democracy is just voting is nonsense. And I really believe that we need like to reinvigorate our belief in that system. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir because your countrymen are fighting and giving their lives for that value right now. So thank you so much for all of your sacrifices, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean again, thank you. But go ahead.
We have 2 minutes left. Could you please
Perfect.
finalize your thoughts, and we will switch into a couple of questions I'm absolutely sure we have for you.
Sure. I'll just go for a minute, and I'll let you, Mike, take the last. So for me, the ultimate way this plays out is very simple. Bitcoin is 3 things. It's many things, but it's 3 things that are relevant to our conversation today. It's free speech, it's property rights, and it's open capital markets. I mean, that's what it represents. That's what the network is. And these things are all characters and values that vibe with a liberal democracy, with rule of law, with open capital markets, with a government that actually protects property rights and upholds free speech. So long term, I think it's very likely that societies like Ukraine and the United States, for all their flaws and for all their corruption, they will get stronger through Bitcoin. And then you look at tyrannies like Putin's Russia, or Xi Jinping's China, or Lukashenko's Belarus, and you realize that they rely on the 3 opposite things. They rely on confiscation, censorship, and closed capital markets. They cannot survive without these things. So it gives me a lot of hope that Bitcoin will be one tool out of many that we use to destroy dictatorships and that we use to improve democracies. So that's why, despite all the work I do and despite, all the people I've talked to over the last 15 years, fighting against dictatorship and just having the toughest time, I remain like incredibly optimistic about the future.
Yeah, and my thought there, as it pertains to Bitcoin and the fight for democracy is, and I guess this message is for Western governments, including, my government in the United States, that like, if we are to stand up for freedom and democracy, then and we are to live up to the ideal of being an open society, government needs to realize that this is ultimately good for us. It's good for us in the free world to continue to allow innovation, to continue to allow civil society to come up with new ideas in which to organize the economy and to express ourselves. And I think we would be going in a deeply anti-democratic direction to try and snuff out this revolution of economic and technological decentralization, which is happening. And I know why policymakers are afraid. Some of those issues are front and present. Like there are concerns about how, illicit actors around the world can use this to subjugate and get around things like sanctions regimes and such. And those are real concerns. I'm not trying to minimize them for policymakers who may be listening, but understand that this is ultimately how we maintain the cause of democracy and freedom at home and around the world, by allowing civil society to continue to build robust abilities for us to self-organize as a society. And so that would be my message to anyone listening in the Western world.